All right, folks. So welcome back to the Friday call with farmers. It's actually called Farmer Friday. And I'm glad to see all of you on here. It's a beautiful day in Kansas. It's overcast. We've still got chance for precipitation over the weekend, and we're so excited to have that. We're excited to have the rain. And let's go ahead and get started here. I have a few slides that I'd love to share as we get started. So this is our 5th Farmer Friday that we've done. And as I mentioned in all the other calls, we are very thankful to our guests that were willing to join us, to hop on the call, to be open and transparent about the issues they face in the current state of farming and agriculture and supply chain and global issues. We were honored to have Brandon Hunnicutt from Nebraska. He talked to us quite a bit about what he's seeing with different commodity issues with farmers for soil health, the climate smart commodity projects, and just his way of being able to diversify his operation through rotation, through interseeding, through adding cover crops. It was a great conversation. And then we switched gears and we went over and talked to Todd Tobin here in Kansas. He's actually in the Pratt, Kansas area, and he farms regenerative agriculture for soil health, and he does that at scale. He's on just a little under 7,000 acres, and one milestone he talked about was being able to get cover crops on 100% of those acres. And he talked about the challenges with this drought and about how it is really important to understand the tools in your toolbox and to use them appropriately. He talked about having to do some light tillage on some areas to be able to get those cover crops established and to keep the system functioning at a high level. So it was really great to have that conversation. Then we heard from Dale Strickler, one of my buddies, one of my good friends. He's got several books, and he talked to us a little bit about precipitation in the small water cycle. So if you want to have a deeper understanding of how to, quote, make it rain, check out that webinar, check out some of his books. And then last week, Jimmy Emmons, I always call him my good buddy. We talked a little bit about the work he's doing with Farm Progress, with the climate smart commodities. He's working on a big project, going to be implementing some holistic and regenerative grazing into the states that he's working with over there with the group. Jimmy, I already forgot it. Trust in Food, I think, is the group that you're with. So as I mentioned today, we've got some really great guests with us. We've got Marcus and Jami Richardson. They're over in Haven, Kansas. They're already on the line. They're geared up. They're ready to go. And then here in a few weeks, I don't know if we're going to have a Farmer Friday next week. I think I'm going to do these quarterly, and I'll just notify you. But we got to get our good friend Mark Heinz on the line. He is our agronomist for PrairieFood. And I think it's probably a good time to get some from the field observations of what we're seeing with PrairieFood, which is our microcarbon product that is produced here in Kansas that has the ability to have a global impact on the way that we look at our farming needs and the way in which we take care of our soil. So it's something that I'm always really excited about. And just a few more slides. As I mentioned, Drew is my co-host. He's in Lawrence, Kansas. I'm over here in Manhattan, Kansas. And Drew is on the data and communications team. And he was adjusting his camera earlier, and I noticed he has a drum machine. And Drew, I guess all of us need to blow off steam throughout the day, and yours is playing drums, huh?
That's correct. My co-host is actually playing the window right now with the drumstick.
I see. I see.
I guess you can't see her.
Well, fantastic. Yeah. And I've got a few co-hosts hopping around my property today. So hopefully they stay. Hopefully they stay where they've been assigned for the day. Okay, so just a last few things. We're talking about regenerative agriculture. Within regenerative agriculture, there are principles that are identified. There is no standard definition. Within each of these principles, there's many practices in which a producer can use that is appropriate for their setting. And so that's one thing that Marcus and Jami are going to talk to us a little bit about today are what are some of the ways and the practices that they utilize to help them achieve their regenerative agriculture goals and principles. So I always add a few funny memes, and I want you to know that I totally rip these off the internet. They're not mine. You can plagiarize them. You can take them from me, but it helps us give a better understanding of what we're talking about today. And the one thing that I wanted to talk about is that in just 1 teaspoon of healthy soil, there is between 100 million and 1 billion individual bacteria. In fact, your body has more bacteria in it than human cells. So we're all just walking around with biology. And how can we take a look at what this living matter can do to improve our soil health, our human health, the nutrient density of our food, and our water quantity and our water quality. So I always like it when we take the big technical information and we put it into different graphical ways that we can remember it. So a friend sent this to me today. There are more organisms in 1 tablespoon of soil than there are people on Earth. So there you go. There is your soil meme of the week. Feel free to steal it. I don't own it. I didn't make it, and I stole it from somebody else. So let's get on to the heroes of the call here. We've got Marcus and Jami Richardson, and who I believe are going to tell us a story about the ways in which they've looked at their operation differently and maybe have some useful information that you can use yourself too. So let's take it away, Jami. And do you want me to stop sharing a little bit so that we can introduce you? Would that be the easiest way to do it?
I think where it's at is fine.
Okay. And we can pin you up here. All right. So welcome to the call, Marcus and Jami. Why don't you guys give us a little introduction about you and the operation?
Yeah.
I'm Jami. This is Marcus. We live in South Central Kansas on around 700-acre farm. I work for PrairieFood on the data and research teams, and Marcus works running the farm operation, and then also off the farm running tree service, Richardson tree service.
All right, so you really came to this conversation by having your boots in the ground, right? So tell us a little bit about, and I'll go ahead and share those slides that you have. Tell me the history of the farming operation.
Well, I guess the start was, the great-grandparents homesteaded the place, so been in the family for, I think I'm the 5th generation there. But yeah, been conventional tillage, primarily wheat, dry land. Yeah, and it's worked out for all the years up until I guess I took over and kind of started transition to regenerative, which has been a fun trip so far. So
Yes,
yeah,
Marcus,
proud of the place and love to build it up and make it better.
I'm looking at your notes here. So what happened in 2018? Was that when you took over the farm? And did you have any thoughts going into the transition of taking over the farm operation, of things that you wanted to do differently, or were you just trying to get your boots on the ground and figure out how to make it work?
I think it was boots on the ground. So I pretty much had to take over for my uncle, which was, I don't know, big responsibility, but also proud to be even offered the opportunity. And yeah, so really wanted to just prove that I knew enough instead of being the farmhand to actually manage equally to what my uncle did. And yeah, and kind of build on that.
Okay, so Marcus, I think we're related. I'm actually a Lanning. My maiden name is Lanning. I'll have to check the family tree and see where Nellie fits.
Yeah.
We could be cousins.
Well, you missed the family reunion last weekend then, Jess.
Yeah.
I didn't get invited. Was it okay? Well, we'll get you invited to. We do the Lanning family reunion in July. It'll be in Rossville, Kansas. So I'll get you guys an invite. You guys can go. All right. That's what I love about farming. That's what I love about, small communities. That's what I love about living in Kansas is we're pretty darn connected in all the ways that we do things here. Okay. So this is your grandpa and your uncle here. Tell us a little bit about some of the financial considerations. Were you married at the time when you took over the farm? Was Jami in the picture? Because she was clearly not in the picture on the last slide.
No, I was not married yet. I met her just after taking over. So So yeah, she's been a big help in building to what it is now, because it is a lot to manage. And
Well, that's a
it's-
good
yeah.
transition, Jamie. Tell us a little bit about your background, some of the things that you've been able to do, and then, you know, maybe how you guys met.
Yeah. Can I take the?
Yeah.
We're sharing a microphone here, so we have to. Yeah, I came into the picture a little later after Marcus started, and one of the cool things about it was that my family, my immediate family, they're not farmers. Both of my parents are biologists, but my grandparents were farmers on my mom's side, and so we spent so much time out there on the farm growing up, around all of that. And so I wouldn't say that I was ever really directly involved in any of that stuff, but I learned a lot just playing around with my grandpa out working. And, you know, my grandma was a big part of that too, not so much operating machinery and all that, but just supporting my grandpa any way she could. And so I put this slide together because it was pretty evident to me that Marcus and I couldn't be where we are now without all of these people. Up there on the upper right, that's Marcus's uncle Gary. He's the one that took over the family farm before Marcus. And then on the upper left is our friend and agronomist Kevin Shonels. He's been instrumental to all of this. It's a really big learning curve for us to start out. And basically we just have to wholeheartedly trust Kevin and his advice and follow through with it. And he's never let us down. Marcus was telling me yesterday that when he first took over, Kevin called him and was like, hey, you know what? I can help you through this. I don't want to charge you an arm and a leg for it. I just want you to do good, and I want you to do good in a sustainable way. And so Kevin is always, he's on our speed dial. We probably talk to him once a day, maybe twice a day. And that's everything from our row crop operation to managing our cattle to picking up our kids from track practice. And so he's just been, we couldn't do this without Kevin.
Well,
And then down in the lower left side, that's my grandpa. And what's interesting about all of this is right as Marcus started taking over the farm, there was this interesting shift between all this conventional equipment and then moving towards equipment needed for regenerative ag. And so a lot of our equipment, as we first started out, was bought out from Gary. But then we also bought quite a bit of my grandpa's equipment, and Marcus, being a good mechanic, he fixed that all into no-till equipment, or, you know, revise the equipment so that it would fit the needs that he had. And then down there in the lower right corner is Marcus with Kevin, and they're just always out in the field looking and seeing what they can do different and different considerations for ultimately raising better crops and better soil.
Well, Jamie, I'll just highlight a few of those things. Now I know that the independent crop consultant, Kevin Schoenholtz, so as an offering, he also picks up kids from track practice. I think that's probably what sets him apart in his product offering. So we've known Kevin for a long time too, and I have been very impressed in how him as a crop consultant agronomist has also led the paradigm shift in the area. You know, he's provided a lot of leadership to producers like you to be able to look at things in a sustainable manner. And I talked to him a couple weeks ago, and he said it's always the option. Producers always have that option with me to advance the soil health system. And he's there to support you no matter what. So I think that's really cool. A couple things that just to pull out there, you know, Marcus, you talked a little bit about the equipment. So it seems to me like the mindset was already in place to when you took over, you were going to think about things like no-till. So did you immediately have to purchase new equipment, or was it more about working with what tools were already in the toolbox? And you can talk about that for a minute here. And I don't know what our next slide is. There we go.
Yeah, it was a big initial investment, just buying out my uncle and all the equipment. So, and he was luckily I mean, nice enough to be my banker for the most part, so I could pay him with interest, so I wasn't just drowning at the bank. And so I didn't really want to upgrade stuff till I had him paid off and get a few years under my belt to prove what I was doing. But yeah, so I think the first step was really just using what I had, and it was really just putting turnips in with my wheat. And it was really fun to watch that first step, trying to get something more for the cattle to graze. First year didn't really work, so the second year I pretty much got the fertilizer spreader from the co-op and had them blend my turnip seed in with my fertilizer. So then I didn't even work it in. I just planted right into it, and the drill pretty much did the work in the ground for me. And the turnips came up better than expected, and it almost looked like a canola field when all those turnips bloomed and yellow flowered, and it looked pretty if you knew what I was doing, I guess.
Yeah.
But
And you put the cows out there for the first time.
yeah, and the cows really enjoyed it, and so did the deer, and so did we.
And the neighbors?
Yeah, I gave some turnips to neighbors and my uncle, and yeah,
So are
there was some.
turnips are they the crop that there's a certain point in the late fall where they turn and you know they're out there because you can smell them?
We didn't really experience that,
No,
but they might have been far enough away from us too.
Yeah. You might have been
Yeah.
lucky on that.
Well,
So
they're supposed to terminate themselves when it gets cold, but it
Yeah.
really never got cold enough to terminate. And so
yeah. So I think
Projecting
that's why they went to the flower stage and pollinated, and the seeds are light enough. They blew out when I cut the wheat, so it really wasn't an issue. But
so
Interjecting a
Marcus,
question
when
here
you
for
first
Marcus.
go ahead, Drew. Go for your question.
All right. Frank in Australia wants to know how you utilize cattle in your system exactly.
that's been a big step because we only have 8 head that we manage. We have a small pasture, and we really don't want to be the cattle farmer. We'd like to be the grain farmer that uses the cows, I don't know, not overuse the ground. So yeah, first step was just trying something on 18 acres to graze the cows, to get them off the pasture for a little while. Last year we did 40 acres of summer grazing cover, and it did awesome. And we were had enough time to paddock it. So 4-acre paddocks. I think there was 10 cows out there at that time. And we did 4 acres, and we moved them every 7 days. And had a lot of neighbors come by. Of course, it was, a drought, so a lot of people were really impressed and came by asking if they could cut and bale it and bring their cows over. And I had enough for me. I didn't want to just use it all up, I guess. I'd rather have a little excess for us. And Kevin Shonels has cows, so I try to manage our ground so he gets more benefit. As much as he's helped us, we want to return the favor all we can. So yeah, between his cows, our cows, and we're just really getting into more covers. I guess that was the first year last year doing that summer grazing. And then this year we went in with a lot of oats. And yeah.
really just using cows as a tool for nutrient cycling. And so we keep all the nutrition there, but we're also managing our residue, and our yield becomes a little bit different in terms of it's not just bushels an acre that we're producing anymore. Now it's pounds per acre in terms of the yield on our cattle. And not so much for us because we only have the few, but what's really nice about farming as a cooperative with our neighbors and our friends is that we don't have to know it all, and we don't have to manage it all ourselves. We can provide certain components of the farm, and they can provide others. And so by and large, Kevin and his family manage the cattle operation, and Marcus manages the row crop operation that's used to farm or to feed those cows.
So Jamie, in your experience working with data, what do you think about when you see this picture here? And maybe give people a little bit about your professional background and the different analysis that you do for your job, for the day job.
Yeah. So, like Marcus said, this is our 40 acres of cover crop that was planted last year. And if the picture was zoomed out just a little bit more, right next to it was our milo crop that was just struggling. And it wasn't because Marcus did anything wrong. It wasn't because he got it in at the wrong time or put it at the wrong depth or we didn't fertilize. It wasn't any of that. We just didn't have any moisture. And what was amazing to me about this is that we kind of went out on a limb and invested in the seed, and we got really tired of, or I got tired of paying the bills on burn down on fallowed ground. And there's just this succession of steps you take to slowly introduce all these regenerative practices, and we hadn't made it to the cover crop side quite yet. And when Marcus put this cover crop in the ground, everybody was just like, you wasted your money, there's no moisture there, the row crops aren't even doing good. And like he said, as this crop started growing, excuse me, he had people drive from all over the county to look at it. And he got phone call after phone call about, can we put our cows out there? Can we bale it? Can we cut it? What did you do? Are you irrigating now? And it was like, we didn't do anything. We just got it in at the right time. We diversified our stand. We had a little PrairieFood out there. We had our cows out there. It was just awesome to see it flourish. And, we got really lucky last year with the drought that our crops weren't affected as badly as they could have been. And I wholeheartedly believe that that's because Marcus has made this transition to regenerative practices, which are building our soils, building our water holding capacity, building our resilience, really. And so while we didn't have the yields we really would have expected in a better year, we had great yields considering. And so that's what I see when I look at this picture.
Yeah,
Part of my background is taking pictures and field observations that agronomists make. And then I also look at soils data from the lab. We go out and pull root digs and whatever. I look at all this data and I assimilate it together to make reports for our growers at PrairieFood to show what difference PrairieFood made on their farm. And so I guess when I look at pictures like this, I have to be pretty broad-minded in what I see there and also very observant. And then I have to pull all these conclusions together to make sure that not just PrairieFood making a difference on their farm, but they're actually advancing through soil health through the regenerative journey that they've chosen to step out on. So we've been part of that ourselves just a little bit. We've got some PrairieFood trials, but yeah, that's kind of secondary to what our focus is, I guess, right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And if anybody on this call, just to reiterate, Jamie is the one that does the data analysis for our PrairieFood and our trials. And so if anybody on this call wants to see some of that or have a discussion, just reach out to me or reach out to Drew on this call, and we'd be more than happy to show you some of Jamie's work. It's actually phenomenal. We look at the way that we are building our company. PrairieFood is a solution. We're also a service, and we're there to come alongside producers to help them understand what we're talking about when we're making these regenerative practices and how we're making changes on the farm. So that part, I really enjoy that part as well. So if anybody has any questions, just feel free to reach out to me. So guys, let's talk a little bit, to go back to Marcus, when you started doing this and when Kevin came alongside you as your agronomist, were you calling it regenerative? I mean, you were looking at the bottom line. You were looking at this. So yeah, did you call it a regenerative? And then if I were to, just by knowing you a little bit, it's a little bit about what the bottom line. And Scott just asked, Marcus, what was your soil like when you took over?
I guess to start, I mean, I pretty much took over farming the same contracts my uncle had, which it's all related ground. So I knew the people, not great. I mean, as a kid, you don't pay attention as enough as you should to know everybody. But
They're
yeah,
your family.
well, you still don't pay attention enough.
You didn't know I was family. Geez.
Well, I know. So anyway, so yeah, I think to start off was just trying to keep my head down and prove, since we were on shares, that we could do it equal or maybe better than what my uncle did. With Kevin's help, obviously, was I think what made us a little bit better. Just having a really good agronomist. So the soil was overworked. So we have a 25-acre spot that never really produced much, that we're actually taking out of production to do 3 years of cover crop. So we kind of lose a little bit of acreage just because, I guess, too much salts and evaporation that just deteriorated, and not enough, not erosion, but water runoff that just set stagnant. And yeah, so we're really going to intensify what we're doing on that ground with cover crops and try to build that up in 3 years and see where it's at. But I mean, we have pretty good soil around here, just south of Haven, north of Cheney Lake. So we're not really clay as far as just south of us, but yeah. So the soils weren't bad to start with, but I know we can sure do a lot to improve them.
Yeah,
trying
the
to-
organic matter percentages were in the low 2s, high 1s%. So maybe 1.9 to maybe 2.4% soil organic matter. And yeah, the places where we really need to do a lot of work, like he said, water would pool. It was more of a drainage issue than anything. You would have, due to the topography, he's got a lot of runoff from his neighbors. That water comes in and settles in his fields, and if there's nowhere for it to go, it just evaporates and it leaves behind this concentrate of weird minerals that almost makes this beach-like sand on top, that when it's wet, it's really sandy like a beach, and then when it's dry, it's harder than concrete. And we've broken a couple shovels doing soil samples out there. I don't even know why we took them at that point, but yeah, he's been really open to pulling those areas out of production and trying to put them back into function just by building soil health in those areas. And luckily our landowners kind of agree with us that continuing to crop those areas isn't really productive or economical, and so they're money ahead by investing in cover crop and letting us do intense managed grazing on that area. And then all of this taking the lead from Kevin on timing of it all and seasonality of our cover crops and all that. But he's got great soil to begin with. You know, there's other places I've looked at over 1,700 soil samples results from people in like the last 4 months. And organic matter is so different depending on soil texture and location and rainfall and all the rest. And so when I saw that we have over 2% soil organic matter to start out with, like, it's nothing to tout about, but it's actually pretty high compared to a lot of places. And he's right, tillage just intensified the problem with the non-productive ground, kind of drug the bad soils around the field, and didn't help anything. And so hoping to raise that quite a bit, but mostly, I guess, in conversations with Kevin, we're not so much worried about where soil organic matter tests out at. We're really just looking for soil function. So I don't know that high SOM necessarily equates to perfectly healthy soil. And so we're not just focused on that, but we're working with our microbes and building better soils and better plants.
Well, it's a systems approach. You've mentioned that before within the team of looking at all of these different parameters. And you mentioned that, so what would you say that these 700 acres had been continuous wheat for a long time? I saw that in your bio. There wasn't a whole lot of diversity over, would you say generations, over decades, probably? Was it?
Yeah, I think it was continuous wheat for the most part. When it was bad enough, he'd rotate to alfalfa, take it out of
Okay.
production for 6 years, and then he'd bring it back.
And he'd
And
go
that
back to wheat, huh?
that was the extent of rotation. He tried a little bit of, I think, milo and soybeans and didn't have much luck, so didn't try it, but a couple times.
I would,
Just
you know,
go a couple slides down.
Yeah.
I think.
I was trying to unmute myself and I kept changing slides.
Oh.
This looks like a microbe.
Yes, that is an organism.
Yeah. So this one or keep going?
Keep going. A little further, maybe. You know, Marcus and I have been to this one. Marcus and I have been to all kinds of soil health programs and conferences and workshops, and every time before he made the switch to regenerative ag, he kept saying, well, yeah, I believe that this is the way we need to go, but I really don't know how to get there. And it was always one of those deals that it was like, maybe it's a good idea, but it's also a lot to learn, a lot to think about, and even more to implement. And so it was almost like intimidation, especially when he was just brand new to taking over. And so we had to find a good starting place. And Kevin has been really great in just meeting us where we're at. You know, we decided to add in turnips, or he decided to add in turnips to the wheat. And I was like, well, how about we just do companion cropping and we throw in flowers and milo and all this stuff? And Marcus was like, oh my gosh, okay, like whatever you say, I guess. And Kevin would be like, no, you need to just slow down a little bit. You don't have the equipment to do this stuff. Just chill out and, you know, let it be. And so our starting point was really just adding in a little tiny bit of diversity as we went. As we added in that diversity, that diversified our food source for our cattle. And then as we got a little bit more in tune to, yeah, we need better equipment to rotate and do all these other things. With those equipment purchases came a whole bunch of new opportunities. So just go back up 2 slides to where the sunflowers and the milo are. But it's still a journey for us. We're 3 years in, maybe ish, to the regenerative ag thing. And instead of wheat to wheat, this is what our crop fields look like now. There's not one place that has just wheat, milo. It's like we have this continuous ground that's just this really nice gradient of colors and blooming times and harvest times and all the rest. And last year, Marcus was really proud of this, and he was like, it'd be so cool if we had a drone and we could fly over and you could see all the different colors when they're all blooming at different times or whatever. And it's something that's really intimidating to start thinking about, but you have to rely on all these other people to download you with all this information. And fortunately, in our relationship, it's like Marcus is the doer. He does all of this stuff. He goes out, implements all the projects that Kevin and I dream up. And he fixes the equipment himself. He makes it an economical venture for us. If all of our equipment was in the shop all the time or being upgraded, it would be so much more expensive than what he brings to the table with his skills. And then everything that I bring to the table on this is just writing down what he did, taking pictures and explaining it. And really, I like to be his cheerleader, to like pump him up for the next cropping season and be like, hey, look what you did last year. Let's do this. And he used to be like, I'm only doing one new thing a year. And I think so he started with the turnips, he started then rotating to milo, and now he's got cover cropping and cattle operations and all the rest. And it's just one of those things, you have to get over the mental block of it being intimidating, and you have to get over the almost provoking attitude of other people around you, that if you're doing something different, like, oh, it's gonna fail, there's no moisture there, you have to get over that, the pessimism of it, and prove that this is the way to go. And I think Marcus is doing that, so I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, you were talking about that cover crop that you guys had the ability to graze. I mean, I've certainly had that happen in my life and my career when in what we were farming in Pratt County. And I didn't say this in the call, but Todd Tobin actually farms the acres that my husband and I operate. And my husband's an agronomist. I don't, he's not, Kevin has a lot that he could teach us too. And I can recall several times feeling like we were pushing the cast pedal too much. And having the first cover crop not do as good as what we thought it was going to do, because you do sometimes get that feeling of everybody else that's doing soil health, that it's rainbows and butterflies, right? And that's why I think it's so important to continue having these conversations and having this transparency to say that there's things that work and there's things that don't work, and you just have to stay with it. So I think that's awesome that you guys are continuing down this path and continue to do that. So since those people that came to you even this last year that were impressed by it, they may have been the same people that were doubters prior, right? And sometimes the people that are the most outspoken in a negative way, sometimes those people come back to maybe be some of your biggest cheerleaders. And I hope that's the case. So outside of just what it visually looks like, and that things are working, what things did you do to test your progress? Jimmy asked if you had done an aggregate stability test. Scott had asked earlier about looking at soil sampling when you first took over, drone aerial footage. I mean, how do you guys in your mind measure success as you go? Is it all the above?
I think my version and hers would be a little different, but
Okay.
well, mine's probably more visual, working, driving through the ground. I mean, it's amazing how much you learn just planning it, driving over spots. And there's spots I take pictures of because pictures don't do justice, but you can tell it's more of a clay spot. And you're like, that's why it didn't do as good as 100 foot to the left, or, so a lot of that. And I guess my memory of knowing where the spot's at, well, it's not there this year, something's changing it and it's in production again, so I can't read soil samples as good as she could, even with a lot of practice, but yeah, that's how I can tell what we're heading to is definitely improving our progress.
Yeah, I think he gets really nervous when we look at our fields versus the neighbor across the road. The neighbor across the road might have a tilled field that, is conventionally farming wheat, and the wheat looks great, and our wheat hasn't poked over our residue yet. And, it's about soil temperatures and all the things, there's a whole slew of things that maybe would put Marcus's field just a little bit behind, but it could be ahead in terms of moisture later or whatever. And I think one of the biggest things that we use to be cheerleaders for each other is Kevin. We went to Kevin's the other day and I was like, Kevin, please tell Marcus that his wheat is fine. And Kevin's like, Marcus, just chill out, man. Like, we need some moisture. It's okay. And that's just, so when you measure success visually, that's what happens is you start to see a little decline or maybe a little stagnation in the wheat growth or whatever. And you get really nervous because you've gone out on a limb and taken this big step to just invest in soil health more than plant health. And you're waiting for the plant health to catch up. And you just have to justify your actions as you go. And that makes him really nervous sometimes. And so it's nice to have Kevin as, the guy who's looking at the holistic approach and explain to Marcus and I really what's going on and why we're making steps towards success and how well that's going. So that's great. On my part, being a data person, Kevin pulls multiple soil samples in each of our fields before he makes fertility recommendations. So as soon as Marcus took over the farm and started on with Kevin, immediately there were fertility reductions. There was a change in the fertility regimen. And so instead of just putting on a whole bunch of starter fertility and hoping it makes it all the way through the season, Kevin was like, well, you can back off on that starter fertility and just do some top dress applications later if you need it. And taking the step to refine your fertility treatments through what the soils actually need. And so that was our starting point. Kevin still makes our fertility recommendations for us based off of those soil samples. But in addition to those, I've pulled multiple soil samples myself. Part of that is for the measuring the success of the PrairieFood trials that we have. But the other part of it is just us trying to reclaim that ground that was taken out of production and measuring our success there. And so we have done the PLFA analysis on our ground. We've done all the Haney soil health tests, conventional soil tests. We test before the crops go in, while the crops are in, after harvest. I think last year we pulled soil samples like too many times throughout the growing season. Marcus is like, oh. So yeah, we've been testing a lot, and a lot of that really has to do with the research aspect behind PrairieFood, but fertility recommendations and scaling have definitely been guided by those soil tests, and they'll continue to be. I mean, even when we get our ground, if we get our ground to the place that we really want it to be, we'll still be soil testing just to make sure that, going in the right direction.
Well, I'll use the tagline for Heartland. If you don't test, it's just a guess.
Yeah.
Yep. So a few of my key takeaways here is that we all need to hire Kevin Schoenholtz because he'll pick your kid up from track and he'll also settle marital disputes about agronomy.
That is true.
Is Kevin on the call? We should really be advertising for him. He's a really good guy. Like I said, we've known him for a while. A couple where I want to go in these next few minutes here, because we're not quite 10 minutes out from the top of the hour here, but I just wanted to ask a little bit about Shelby put in the comments here, talking about how you're highlighting return on investment, especially those gains outside of yield numbers. Sometimes those aren't necessarily tied to dollars. So let's talk about ROI, and then we did talk a little bit about the PrairieFood trials, and I think maybe as a way to end cap the conversation, we could go back to that trial picture that you took, and you can just walk us through what you're seeing out there in the field. So yeah, how are you guys highlighting ROI for yourselves right now, and how has that changed since 2018?
So I like watch all the finances too, and Marcus is really good about bringing me all the receipts and all the things, but I kind of handle that part. And so I guess for us, tracking economics is a huge deal for us. I can tell you to the penny how much we've spent on equipment, on parts. I can tell you whether it's even economical to start upgrading or fixing the combine, or whether we should just buy a new one. And that's just because I've tracked all that stuff for the last, 3-4 years. And we can start to make decisions based on those economics. And probably, I don't know, he bought out all the farm equipment and whatever, and it was like whether he needed or not, we bought it. And so as we move to this regenerative thing, knowing that the equipment needs are different than what we've got. That means we've had to go through and sell a lot of things, buy a lot of things. And unfortunately, we couldn't have done that without jobs outside of the farm. And so we don't work on operating loan. We're not in debt in the farm. And that is pretty amazing, I think, for two people starting out on our own. And all the equipment purchases we've had to, make in the last 5 years. But also, that just, it's a testament to how hard Marcus works off of the farm, how hard I work off of the farm, and how we are willing to invest those finances outside of the farm business into our farm business. And it's a lot, but it's important to us. And our return on investment, I'm not really sure what aspect of that you want to really talk about. If we talk about return on investment on our equipment, I would think that changing from all the conventional equipment to the no-till has definitely been a lifesaver. We've invested in precision ag equipment and retrofitted a lot of our older equipment so that we could use it in that way. And again, just the equipment is the biggest hang up, when it comes to implementing all of these things. And so Marcus being able to fix all that stuff and make it all work out, that's been key. Hard to measure ROI on crops and yields and all the rest, because we didn't even get any rain from the time that we planted the crops till the time we harvested the crops last year. And like I said, we were already a little bit ahead by building that resiliency, but it was still disappointing harvest.
Yeah, has there been anything you've done? I'm kind of adding in one more question, and Scott had a question about low interest loan availability. Has there been anything you've done that you were just convinced because of the education that you had, the research that you had done, that you felt really confident making a decision to implement something, and then something didn't work the way that you think, outside of not getting rain or outside of environmental, has there been anything that you just, and we've done this before at other calls, and we've done this at some in-person events, like at Fuller Field School, where we call it the Failures Forum. And usually it's accompanied by a few pints of beer, and where people will talk about, man, I just knew something was going to work and it just did not work. And I felt like a fool. So if you had anything that you're just so convinced and it didn't happen. We didn't prepare for this question.
I can't.
You're starting the marital disputes again?
Yeah, am I starting a marital? Okay, I'll back off.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I saw
honestly
that look.
can't
It was
think of
like,
anything.
don't go there.
I can think of something. But okay, I really love sunflowers. And so Marcus was like, I'll just plant you a whole field of them. I don't even have to pick them and bring them to you, And so we put sunflowers in, and the emergence, that picture I took, we had really decent emergence right there. But the whole rest of the field was the area that we've taken out of production. And so the emergence was terrible, and it was not uniform at all. We had some green and just barely growing sunflowers, and we had others that were mature and the birds had already gotten to them. And by the time it came time to harvest, Marcus took one little pass and he was just like, I'm not cutting this. It's awful. It's oily and it's spongy and it's disgusting, and there's not any seeds in the heads, and it was disappointing. And the whole reason we put those sunflowers there was to help with compaction issues, and they're supposed to be kind of salt tolerant, and it's really salty right there because of the stagnant water issue or drainage problems. And so I was just like dying to have the sunflowers do the good, and he was turned off to sunflowers because of that whole experience. And this year, we were kind of thinking that we could diversify our soybean rotation and put sunflowers in instead. And I was like, how about we do 200 acres of sunflowers? And he's like, how about we do 40? At least he was open to the 40. But that one failure was enough to make him apprehensive to, continue planting, and he probably will later. But that's really the only one I could think of that just didn't work out the way we want.
Well, if you
Yeah,
could do
that
that
was-
40 by the road, maybe you can open it up for some agritourism dollars and charge people for photos.
Yeah, there you go.
See, ROI.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Jamie, could you tell us a little bit more about this picture here? And then we're getting closer to that top of the hour. And if anybody has more questions, feel free just to stick them in the chat, or we're also very open. You can turn on your camera and ask a question if you'd like to. But yeah, Jamie, take it away on what you see here.
Yeah, this was the area that we took out of production because the soil was just beaten to death. And that's a low-lying area. You got runoff that comes in through the trees there and sits in our field off of the neighbors. And so we put PrairieFood down on a portion of this field just to see if it would help us or not. And PrairieFood was very willing to look into this kind of a project because non-productive land reclamation is a big issue, not just in Kansas with the different salts or drainage issues, but in other places where desertification has happened or whatever. And so this was kind of a foot in the door exercise for PrairieFood on figuring out application methods and the rest. We had Hank come out and he brought us a little 3-point sprayer, and we applied 30 gallons an acre PrairieFood over the top of standing wheat. What's interesting about this picture is that the PrairieFood was applied the previous year as top dress to that wheat. Not really top dress because it's not fertilizer, but that was the method we used to broadcast. And this picture was taken a year later. And so this is on cool season cover crops that were planted in March. Well, they were planted in December, but they didn't really emerge. And so we planted them again in March. And you can see the line of PrairieFood versus no PrairieFood application there. So that black line that goes across horizontally, that's the application line. And the green lines there are the planting line, so you can see where the crops are emerging. And then the red line there that goes at like a 45, 50 degree angle from that is where phosphorus was applied in 2x2 during the sunflower planting. Well, the sunflower planting didn't really work out, so the plants weren't using the nutrition. It was available right there. Wheat needs, well, not wheat, but cool season crops, as they start to come out of dormancy and green up in the spring, they need that phosphorus before the microbes are even working for them. And so in this case, this was pretty cool because PrairieFood clearly fed the microbes, which put them into overdrive, started cycling that nutrition and making it available to the plants. Well, when there was no plants to use that nutrition, the fertility just sat there. Now these cool season cover crops are coming in, and you can tell that they're boosted by the nutrition that was applied several months before they were planted. So pretty cool. Is that our fault?
Oh, I can never find, when I'm sharing, I can never find my controls. And so I end up like advancing multiple slides before I can find the controls of my Zoom. You would think after all these years of all of us that have done remote work, we would be super whizzes at this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think that's fantastic. And we are very happy that you're on the PrairieFood team, Jamie. Thank you so much. And thank you, Marcus, for being willing to help put out these trials. I think that we've had phenomenal results for it. I know Rob Harrington, we've got other people on the call here that are on the PrairieFood team. And we just really thank you for being open and willing to do this and help us analyze what's happening in the soil. You know, you mentioned you've already read 17,000, was it 17,000 soil samples?
1,700.
1,700, yeah. Already this year. And so that's not a small task. It's not as big as 17,000, but 1,700 is definitely not a small task. And we
I
just
don't
really
want to read
thank you.
17,000 in 4 months, Jess.
Yeah, that would be a lot. You don't need sleep, and you've got people picking up your kids, and you've got people settling all of your marital disputes. So hey, why not read soil samples? So yeah, any more questions here for Marcus and Jamie that could be helpful? And just thanks all of you that have been on this call. We've gotten some great encouragement. Jimmy Emmons, said just keep on going and don't worry about those neighbors and those fields. You're exactly correct. You can't compare residue versus clean and how that wheat looks. So any final thoughts, any words of wisdom to help others hop on this journey?
I'd
Hey,
say it's a
Jessica.
learning curve.
Yeah, Jimmy, go ahead, Jimmy.
Yeah, Jessica,
Oh,
Marcus.
Scott. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Marcus and Jamie, I really appreciate your willingness to tell the true story. That's good. One of the questions I have is, with Kansas Department of Health and Environment, we've had a low interest loan program. And when the interest rates were at 3% or whatever, it didn't go very far. But do you have any thoughts on how we can try to develop more of a sense of getting that opportunity to producers so that they know that there are some banks out there that will work with you on equipment purchases and so forth? Do you have any ideas?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't know. We kind of have the mentality that if we don't have to be in debt, we're just not gonna. And so it would have been nice to have the operating loan or low interest loan for just a cash flow situation. You have to save up and pay the
Right.
co-op for fertility or whatever you have to do, seed costs, all the rest. But we've been fortunate to not need that. And so that's not really something that we've, I guess, put a lot of time in exploring either. So I don't think we can really answer that.
Yeah. It's almost like taking small bites so you can chew it, use the old equipment, fix it up. You can make some money instead of shopping when you're hungry and overbuying the new toys.
The
And
new toys.
Yeah, that makes sense. What about are you guys in any of the programs, or do you participate in the crop insurance program? Since you don't have the operating note, you're probably not required to. How do you guys look at risk?
We do have crop insurance and we're beginning farmers. And so that crop insurance is heavily subsidized by the federal government. And so it's not a big investment for us to buy a crop insurance policy to cover all of our stuff. The hang up we have seen is that with our rotation schedule, it's a little harder to plan ahead for the insurance agencies to decide what policies they need to assign to us. And so that plus cover cropping is never covered by crop insurance. If you double crop or you try to just tighten your rotation even more, that second crop isn't covered. And so we haven't really relied on crop insurance too much either. We had a big hit with our soybeans last year and we did get some payout, but the level of payment that we subscribe to on that is very low. And so it's almost like the disaster only level.
Yeah,
major
medical.
Yeah, I think part of that is we're comfortable with it because we're building resiliency in our soils, which builds resiliency in our plants. And so, if we have one big hit, then we'll have just enough to cover that through that emergency plan or policy. But ultimately, a wavering yield isn't a big problem for us right now, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. You guys, you're at this level. I mean, I know there's always things that keep you up at night. But just how cool is it that you've been able to make these advancements in the years that you've been doing it? So just thank you guys so much and for being leaders, and however much more you want to keep talking. We've always got places to plug in speakers and producer-led education series. So thank you guys so much for being willing to come on here and tell a little bit about your story. All right,
I'm
so
close.
I think we're at the top of the hour. We've blew past the 1 o'clock hour. I have one more question. Do you have a reptile or a fish behind you in the
We've got both.
yeah,
No.
okay, nice.
We've got a snapping turtle.
A
up
snapping
here,
turtle?
and we've got a skink in the other one.
Oh, really? My kids used to catch those when we lived
Yeah,
in
they
here.
bite hard.
Oh,
Did
really?
they get bit when they caught them?
I don't think that I mean, it was always my husband would take them hunting for them down at the Pratt County Lake. So I think it was a way to also occupy their time. All right, folks. Well, that's all we've got for this Farmer Friday. We'll be sending out more emails about when we're going to get kickstarted. I think we're going to do a quarterly series. So this would be considered our first quarter. We're looking at mid-June to kickstart another series of Farmer Fridays. And then we'll get them going again in the fall and then once again in the winter time. So thank you to everybody that have joined us. Thank you, Jami Marcus. Thank you, Drew, and everybody on the PrairieFood team. Signing off for now. And